Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So guys, I got a bad feeling, okay? And it's the same feeling I had about 3 months ago when Russia shot down that satellite that nearly took out the space station. And I knew it was a harbinger for something to come in light of what was starting to transpire in Ukraine, but it hadn't really popped off yet and people didn't really know if it was going to be big. But I have an extremely bad feeling, and I'm going to give you my theory about what is going on today. Now, you're going to notice some interesting parallels between the pandemic and this war. If you look at the dates in particular, it was around the same time that it really started building up, and the WHO finally declared the pandemic on March 11th, and the parallels are so uncanny. Like on March, I believe it was February 25th actually, when Trump had made that statement about how, there's only 6 cases, it's going to go away. I remember that distinctly, February 24th. And of course, this war started officially, I believe it was on February 24th, 25th, something like that. And it wasn't until March 11th that the WHO finally officially declared a pandemic. The markets crashed, and we all know what happened from there. Now, I get the same sense that the media run up to that. There's some very, very scary parallels to this. And by that I mean you're getting all of these ambivalent reports about peace talks now. And it's completely dissonant with what is happening on the ground. I mean, this is a war. Like, this is a big, serious war where thousands of people are dying. It seems as though, because remember in the run-up to the WHO declaring a pandemic, there was all this talk about, well, maybe it's not going to be a pandemic, maybe it's going to die out, maybe only Asians get it, maybe only old people are going to get it. And but then officially the hammer came down and that was it. And I get the exact same vibe from this NATO being pulled into the war thing. Because you look now with what is happening between the United States sending $800 million in weaponry. And I know in war that's not a lot of money, realistically. But it's symbolic, especially in light of where Russia is at right now, especially in light of where Putin is at right now, probably mentally. Giving these ultimatums from his bunker and all this stuff, and this nuclear tension that's in the air, and you have the U.S. sending and saying that they're going to send $800 million worth of weapons. Now, for starters, I know you got to get congressional approval for all this stuff, but Christ, why would you say that? Why would you tell them that you were going to do that? Wheel it across the border at nighttime. Do it discreetly. Don't make a big statement about it unless there was somebody who maybe wanted this thing to blow over into surrounding countries. But think about what's going to happen now. What is going to happen if they send over these missile defense systems? We're talking about potentially serious equipment, I think. And I could be wrong about this, but I've heard they could potentially be sending some like S-300 missile defense systems, which of course are ironically Soviet missile systems, which of course the Ukrainians know how to use. So it would make no sense to send equipment that they didn't know how to use, unless you were sending mercenaries who knew how to use it. But think about what that's going to do. That's going to bring the war closer to Eastern Europe, to Hungary, to Poland, to Romania. That's what's going to happen. And all this ambivalence about, peace talks, even though this war is existential for both sides. This is existential for Russia. As I've said before, Russia cannot come back to the West. They just simply cannot come back. They will not come back. You're talking about what? Like $600 billion in frozen assets, which was essentially theft. That's what that was, in a way. Okay, now you could say everything you want about how they shouldn't have invaded, and I agree. There was other diplomatic solutions, diplomatic avenues. They could have been more creative. But you're talking about that much money. Do you seriously think that they're ever going to come back? And do you seriously think they can give this up? I have a bad feeling that we are much, much closer than a lot of people think to this thing getting absolutely crazy for a number of reasons. We're seeing dissonance in terms of what's being said and what is actually being done on the ground. So you're seeing all these things about peace talks, right? And how, there's progress, even though neither side has made a single concession, with the exception of Zelensky maybe saying something like, we accept that we're not going to be taken into NATO, which is something which is, was a given anyways. It was never something which was up for debate in the first place, because NATO would never have accepted them. Well, at the same time, what you're seeing on the ground contradicts that entirely. I mean, the war is escalating. This is a war. I mean, this is the war of our generation, quite possibly. And there is absolutely no sign on the ground that this thing is letting up at all. And so these ambivalent news reports were the exact same type of reports we heard into the run-up before the WHO officially declared it a pandemic. Okay? And there's another thing here too, is that right now you have a lot of socioeconomic hardship in the United States. And you have this talk, which it's just talk right now. Saudi Arabia, talking about the petrol yuan and starting to trade their oil and buy their, use yuan, Chinese yuan, to trade their oil. That's very significant, incredibly significant. If they go that route, the dominoes start falling. Now consider this. A lot of people have been saying that this is all just a big distraction and, from the economy. And while there's always truth to the distraction argument, it seems like there's some people who, right when anything happens, it's just a distraction from this and that and this and that. Well, that may be a secondary function of it. I don't believe that's the primary function. The primary function is that there's a war between Russia and Ukraine, and it potentially will have dire consequences for us all if it goes nuclear. That's the main problem. But indeed, there is economic motive in this. Because, remember, right about now, the Fed is starting to raise interest rates. The money printer has slowed down. But the money printer has slowed down right around the same time that Saudi Arabia is saying, you know what, maybe we're going to trade in the Chinese yuan. And, what would be an excuse to have one last blast on the printing press, dust it off, and make the money printer go burr once again? What would allow us to do that? Well, maybe a war would allow us to do that, right? Because, if we have an economic slowdown as a result of the war, well, we got to do something. We got to get some more stimulus into people's pockets, because the war could create problems. And yeah, it seems like there's a lot of things which are just lining up, okay? And this war, guys, when this delivery of supplies finally does get there, if it hasn't got there already, I don't know when they're going to do it, under the cover of night or what. I personally wouldn't have said anything about it. But when they do it, you can bet that this war is going to get closer to those Eastern countries' borders. That's when this could potentially spill over. And if it spills over, that is going to be the equivalent of when the WHO declared a pandemic. That's when shit is going to hit the fan. And that's when the panic is going to start. Do you understand? That's when it's going to start. I hope it doesn't happen, because I am not ready. I am not ready for that yet. And I get chills just thinking about what the implications of something like that are going to be. Because if any country in NATO gets involved, all of NATO gets involved. That means that we get involved. And that means that it's World War III. And we don't want that. Okay? Now, I know that this is all speculation. I understand that. And I wouldn't expect you guys to take my word for it. Like I said, I hope I'm dead wrong about this. Because if I'm right about this, it's going to be bad. It's going to be really, really bad. By the way, it's going to be a really hot summer this year. And we're going to see some crazy climate chaos again, okay? And I just don't know how we're going to deal with all these things at once. That's the real problem. There's going to come a point when all of this stuff starts to, it's like we can only keep all the balls in the air, you know, and I think this year is going to be a bad one for the weather. Anyways, that's an aside. But in bushcraft, we have this thing called wide angle vision, and I make these speculative videos because sometimes if you're going to try to solve a problem or try to truly understand something and see the forest for the trees, you have to use what's called wide angle vision. And it's an idea that usually when you're looking at something, when you human vision is based on like a focal point. So you're looking at, I'm looking at the camera, and our actual our focal range isn't that big, believe it or not. It's just like a small dot in our visual field where we're actually 100% in focus, in full resolution, and the rest is kind of peripheral. It's blurry in the periphery. The idea of wide angle vision is that you're trying to not focus on anything, and you're trying to see the whole picture. You're trying to see the big picture as to what's going on. And you can use this technique in the forest in order to scan the perimeter for threats, okay? Because what happens is you get tunnel vision. Not only in life, but, you know, when you're walking through a forest in particular, and I see, you know, guys on quads and skidoors, I'll be literally standing right next to the road and they will not see me. It's like they're a horse with blinders on, okay? And that can happen to you in terms of your media perceptions. Like right now, if you really see the forest for the trees, you're seeing the war escalating. At the same time, there's this dissonance where you're seeing, oh no, there's progression in the peace talks. Okay, what is the progression? Nothing, you know, tangible, but there's progression. They're talking. Okay, that's a good thing that they're talking. Don't get me wrong. And I truly do hope that one side makes a concession soon. Oops. So I've been a little aggressive in my timelines, as usual. My predictions always seem to bear out, you know, but they're just too aggressive sometimes. And I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those things it's not going to be like war right away, like the Archduke is shot and, you know, we go to war. And I don't even think it was like that then. I'm sure there was some run up to it, some build up, you know, that was happening. It wasn't just, you know, SHTF right away. It's going to be this slow decline, just like the pandemic. So we need to not be desensitized. And I'm partly to blame for that, okay? People think, oh, I'm doing this for views. I could care less about the views at this point. And quite frankly, I got, 740,000 wonderful subscribers now? And go and find the last video where I had 740,000 views. That's how you know a channel is really in favor of the algorithm, is if they're getting videos that exceed their actual sub count, because that means they're being promoted to a larger audience. I don't think we've gotten that in a long time, but I appreciate the viewership that I do have, because I know that we're making a positive difference in terms of just encouraging people to be self-reliant. And guys, I'm releasing a video this week which summarizes my perspective. We've been working on this video for a while, and it summarizes my vision for what's coming, because it's undeniable at this point. The times are likely going to get very, very difficult, and the future is not looking good right now. Watch Koyana Kwatsi. If you've ever seen that movie, watch it. Thanks, guys. Take care.